Hello and welcome everyone to the ET Startup Awards. Rajeev, big welcome to you. Thank you so much for joining us once again. It's always such a pleasure talking to you. Rajeev is probably one of the rare ministers with whom you can discuss the complexities of what goes inside a semiconductor chip and at the same time talk about probably the latest fad on Instagram. Of course, on a very, very rare day in his very busy life. So, Rajiv, I'll probably start by saying that maybe 10 years ago, even maybe 5 years ago, when it came to products that were built in India, the acceptance was very low. People smirked. They were considered low quality, subpar. That seems to be changing, right? Recently, Apple, a company like Apple, which is supposed to be very, very close, said that they'll be adopting the NAVIC chips, which is alternate to GPS. They're sort of leading the way when it comes to adoption of NAVIC chips. Google is making Chromebooks in India. Micron is setting up a chip packaging unit. Chandrayaan, of course, will open opportunities that probably are unfathomable. What is changing? Where do you see this going from here?
So, Survi, thank you for having me. And it's becoming a nice habit to come to the Eco Times Startups Award. Satyan said something in his opening remarks, and I think you can take a cue from that. There was a little skepticism, there was scorn, there was, there's a little aberration, this whole phenomenon of young Indians building these companies and startups. And there was a lot of that. I can safely testify to that. There was a lot of that in the political and government ecosystem. There was a lot of that in the existing legacy technology companies. But over the last 5-6 years, if there is a defining outcome of what we have done and what is now evident, is that the confidence amongst the world's investors, consumers, companies, enterprises, about the capabilities that this generation of entrepreneurs bring to bear is unquestionable. I think that is the big leap that has happened. And it's not just about consumer tech, it's not just about D2C, it spans the entire spectrum of what we refer to as a digital economy today. And you will see such high quality, deep work that is being done in every one of those areas. You take it as AI, the Web3, the consumer internet as you know it, semiconductors, microelectronics, sensors. Every one of these areas today has deeply capable startups and young entrepreneurs at work. So I think that is it. The pedigree, in a sense, of India's capability has been firmly established and in a lot of ways reset from the old narrative that we were the back office. We are certainly today in the league of, when the Americans sign the ISET agreements with us, where the EU signs the agreements on semiconductors with us, when the Japanese sign agreements on electronics and semiconductors with us. I think the world now recognizes that the future of technology will certainly be shaped as much by Indian entrepreneurs and Indian minds as the Americans or the Japanese or the Koreans or the Europeans.
Sure. Like you said, that there's been a reset. There's optimism all over, there's euphoria, there's opportunity. But at the same time, many of the startups are struggling. We saw what happened with the gaming decision, 28% GST. Similarly, probably crypto also went through a similar sort of a setting where the 30% tax was put on them. While India has been very progressive when it comes to not banning these emerging areas or emerging technologies, but taxing sectors to death is something which is emerging as a concern. I was at a panel recently and one gentleman got up and he said, all my peers in the crypto space are dead. I'm moved to Singapore, but I'm shutting shop. So what would you say to that?
No, so I was hoping that I would not have this question asked. So obviously that hope has been shot. Look, I've been an entrepreneur once, and many here have been or are entrepreneurs. And you do realize that as you stray into areas that are unregulated or where the clear framework or guidelines are not visible, you can see that as an opportunity and then go full hog and then develop something because everybody else is afraid of coming there. Or you can wait for the framework to evolve. Now, what has happened, particularly in the online gaming space, is certainly that there was a free-for-all for several years. There was no framework, and therefore there were some good actors that have essentially milked that lack of a framework, and there were bad actors that are there were good bad actors that sort of milked that lack of framework, and there are good actors that really went and innovated and created these beautiful companies. Now, we are trying since the 7th of January of this year to put together a framework that will define what permissible online gaming is. We did this very successfully. We ran this through a consultation process, and over 4 months, we have created a framework that we believe is an extremely sound framework that lays out what would be the playground and the rules in that playground for all real money playing online games. Now, there is a lag between how my ministry and part of the government is doing this and the other parts of the government that have been, in a sense, become gun shy because of the episodes of the past and the bad actors. So I can just safely tell you today that there is a lot of effort going on in harmonizing every ministry and every view, especially the finance ministry, where there has been a strong view, given the bad actors in the past, that GST should be punitive, and it should basically discourage online gaming because there is a lot of badness associated with it. We have explained where we are going. The whole of government is very interested in making sure there is a clear, predictable framework for online gaming innovators and startups. And I'm very confident, I say this with a great deal of confidence, that you will soon see that the framework has been implemented and there is an all of government consensus on that. And it'll be the sunrise again, if you want to call it that, sure, for the online gaming sector.
I'm sure that'll be very comforting to a lot of people in this room. But you spoke about harmonization of the government on policy frameworks. After probably you took over as MoS, we've seen a spate of policies in the digital space. I want you to talk to the audience on how should they read it. Right now, there are so many policies on the digital sector. Let me name them probably: Digital India Act, the Digital Data Protection Act, the Digital Competition Act, Telecom Bill. TRAI keeps coming up with papers on how to regulate metaverse and things like that. There's this threat of probably AI regulation looming. So how should people interpret that? It's becoming very hard for startups to navigate this. The big companies have the lawyers, like you keep saying. But what about the small guys?
First of all, let me clarify today that there is only one act, which is that we have passed, which is the Digital Data Protection, Personal Data Protection Bill, and that today sits with the IT Act. So there are only two legislations that are at work here, and if you're a startup today, you just need to be worried about these two legislations. Now look, we all know that digitalization and the effect of digital technologies is across board. It is impacting the entire economy, and therefore, many parts of the government will respond to this very differently. So the Telecom Bill was one effort. There is a Digital Competition Act which comes from the Competition Commission saying, look, we are worried about the openness of the digital space, anti-competitive behavior that some of the big tech companies are demonstrating. So all of them will initiate this. But I can certainly tell you with absolute clarity and authority today that this will all finally get harmonized as an all-of-government approach. There will not be a case that there will be a Digital Competition Act, then there'll be a Digital India Act, and there'll be a Telecom Bill, and there'll be 4 other bills that will create havoc for the startups. Our Prime Minister has a clear-cut view and has certainly given this as an instruction. Our legislative process, our way of making rules and laws will be to catalyze and further accelerate our innovation ecosystem, not to create roadblocks. And it is certainly not going to be any government or any part of the government's effort at all to create even a small road bump. You know that we spoke about this in the DPDP context. And a lot of people said, no, but this is not GDPR, it is not ABCD, it is not EFG. It is because it is not GDPR, precisely because we want all of our legislations and rules to be enabling the ecosystem and further accelerating it and helping it grow, rather than creating difficulty, road bumps, and hurdles in terms of innovation growth. So I wouldn't worry too much about the news coverage on this. I'm sorry to say this in an ET startup event, but I wouldn't worry too much about it. I think finally there will be a Digital India Act, there will be a DPDP, and there will be some elements on the competition law that will be amended, which will effectively deal with the distortions on the internet that some of the big tech platforms tend to demonstrate and tend to bring because of the sheer size of the presence. And for our startups, we certainly want to make sure that these big platforms don't come in the way and become elephants that sort of create hurdles and create an uncompetitive landscape for our startups.
Sure. Thank you so much for that answer. Unfortunately, you said road bumps, and I'm going to interpret that in the literal sense and ask you, what is your reaction to what's happening in Bangalore? We've all heard great weather, bad traffic, but now with Trevor Noah roasting us on a global platform, Bangalore is your city.
Look, this is the other question I was hoping I would duck, but look, I'm a member of parliament. This is my home. This is my city. I love this city a lot. It has done a lot for me. And I think successive governments have been unjust to the city. And I will just leave it at that. Unfortunately, a lot of governments have a tremendous presence of real estate and contractor vested interests that drive the government's priorities. And the victim has been this beautiful city. So, look, I am as aggrieved about it as you are. If not, I am even more aggrieved about it. There have been many, many attempts to create an agenda of, governance, urban governance, and creating a much more citizen-first approach to development in the city. Many people, I see some people in the audience who have volunteered time and effort. A lot from the tech community have done that. But we are where we are, and it is what it is. And I'm sorry I can't give you a much more optimistic answer. And certainly not with the current government. Certainly there's no cause for any optimism anyway.
Well, that was coming. I'll pause here now and probably take some questions from the audience. Can we please have the mics? Kunal, I guess you had a question.
Hello, sir. In terms of the growth that we are looking for the country, we are doing well on all metrics except one metric, which is female participation of labor. And it seems to be a declining trend, female participation of labor. And urban one is even more declining quite in a steeper manner. I think if we have to grow our per capita income to 2x with one gender participating, it's not going to happen. So is there a government initiative? Because we did the education part, but that did not cause employment and participation. I mean, just to give you some data points, like 95% of all financial assets, credit cards, loans, everything is just men. When do we see the government kind of participating and doing something about it?
Look, I'll say two things. I'll answer this in two ways. One is, of course, the space that I have the privilege of being a minister in both IT and electronics. The women participation is in the ballpark of 48 to 49%. So it is very high, especially in the tech and the electronic space. Some of these cutting edge factories that are today manufacturing devices that are being exported to markets all around the world are 75% women. So I can safely say that the space that I am involved in is certainly very highly represented and well represented by the women of India. But our government's approach to this has been fairly horizontal and has been very deep and structural. So we've looked at empowerment of women on one hand with the Women's Reservation Bill, but leading up to that, we have really created economic empowerment. I don't know how many of you know, but there are over 4 crore Indians, women, 4 crore Indian women, that's 40 million, that are beneficiaries of PM Awas Yojana who have gone from zero asset to having an asset of 2.5 lakhs in their name. So I think this is a process because 65 years of this type of negligence, we have in the last 8-9 years significantly moved ahead on that. Are we perfect yet? Certainly not. Do we have women fighter pilots and women combat soldiers and women represented in every part of the government? Yes. Are we happy with where we are and can we do more? Of course. Do we have enough women MPs? No. Will the Women's Reservation Bill mean an 18-year-old girl today in college or a 19-year-old today can look at public life as a realizable, real opportunity for herself? Yes. So I think we are certainly on the move. We are not there yet. But I think we are making all the right moves in terms of getting more and more women into leadership positions, both corporate and in politics and public policy.
Sure, thank you. All right, this side, please. Please identify yourself. Please stand up.
Good evening. Thank you so much for giving me an opportunity. I'm Rahul Gupta, setting up a fund called Valuable, where the idea is to mainstream inclusion. Rajeev, for the last 2 days, I was at the IIT Madras campus, where the Empower conference was taking place. And to our delight, we saw 400 assistive tech startups being there. It's a country, well, of course, the latest census has not happened, but it's estimated to have 210 million persons with disability, where we are now talking about seeing them as a consumer, which potentially has a large estimated income. Globally, persons with disability are estimated to have a disposable income of $1.9 trillion. So it's clearly not a space to be missed out. Kudos to the government that today government platforms, including the eGEM platform, is completely accessible. But it's important that we have the right act, and enforceability of that act is critical. As I was just walking up from in this hotel, it was painful to see that an infrastructure which is owned by a Canadian major is not accessible. So it's important that we don't let people take these things for a ride. We strengthen the structure, and startups. In some way, these assistive tech startups that are today there are given more room, and potentially one of the ways could be having some sort of a carve-out in terms of priority sector lending or something where they are encouraged more, and these people eventually could be mainstream. Eventually, everybody has to age, and age will not see any gender diversification or caste, religion, and anything. But these things will eventually happen. So it's just a request to think a little more through this, and if you have any ideas.
Certainly, I completely agree with you. And I just want to add that, for example, in our skilling ecosystem, there is a lot of work that we are doing, and there are a lot of skilling programs that we have developed, especially for the Divyang and for the differently able. So there is a complete curriculum that has been developed and skill delivery for a lot of those who want to join the skilling ecosystem and were unable to do so in the normal, regular ecosystem. So, but the essence of what you say, the spirit of what you say, I certainly get and agree with.
Thank you so much, Rajeev. With that, we've come to an end of this session. Can you please give a big round of applause to the Minister?